Hello, welcome to our next lecture. Today we'll be talking about the European language portfolio. Alright, before we focus on the language portfolio, let's have a look at the main aims of Council of Europe. I guess that you heard that actually that was Council of Europe that issued the document that is called European Language Portfolio. Let's have a look at these two main aims. The first one is that Council of Europe promotes awareness of a European identity that is based on shared values and cuts across different cultures. And at the same time, it places a great importance on the maintenance of linguistic and cultural identity, improving communication and mutual understanding. And in pursuit of these aims, Council of Europe develops the European Union member states' agreements to standardize the social and legal practices in these countries. And as you remember, the focal point of our discussion today is ELP, and ELP is actually a document that is an example of such an agreement. It concerns the learning of foreign languages for communicative purposes. So in other words, it's a kind of a product of such an agreement. Actually, ELP is the most ambitious project that has ever been undertaken in the field of foreign language education. And how did it all start? It all started from a symposium that was held in Ruslikon in Switzerland. And at this symposium, there were different committees that were working, and they put forward an idea of establishing a comprehensive, coherent and transparent framework for description of language policy. And at the same meeting, they also recommended a common instrument allowing individuals to maintain a record of their language learning achievement and experiences, both formal and informal. If you want to have a look at more details, I recommend to have an insight into the documents of Council of Europe from 1992. You may find more information on page 39. At this time, two groups have been set up, and one was focused on the common framework, and the other at the same time was working over a draft of ELP. And now let's move to the functions of ELP. Frequently at different lectures on methodology for language learning and teaching, I can hear the question, what is the relationship between common European framework of reference for languages and European language portfolio? Sometimes I even heard the question, well, is it the same? Of course, guys, that's not the same. These are both official documents that were issued by the Council of Europe, and they were developed simultaneously between 1991 and 2001. However, their ideas, that are behind these two documents are completely different. Well, the Common European Framework of Reference, the very name suggests that it's a kind of a common ground for evaluation of learners across different European countries. And ELP, in turn, it was conceived from the very beginning as an implementation tool for a common European framework of reference. All right, so what is this mysterious ELP? It's a document in which foreign language students can record and reflect on their learning and cultural experience. What you have in this slide is actually an example, a picture of a cover of the book. Actually, it's a kind of a folder. It looks like this, right? So it's a folder for your students. But of course, there are some other additional books that are for teachers in the form of guidelines. There are two functions of European language portfolio. The first function is related to documentation. So you as a learner, you keep a record of your achievements. In other words, it documents its holders' plurilingual language proficiency and experiences in other languages in a comprehensible, informative and reliable way. And the second function is related to reporting. So ELP is a kind of instrument that helps learners to take stock of the levels of competence they have reached in their language. Alright, in order to show you how it works in practice, I'm taking the folder that I presented to you before, alright, and I'm taking out from this folder 2 pages. The first page is devoted to your abilities. So the learner takes a page like this, right, and he or she may read different statements related to his abilities, and he or she is able to evaluate what he already knows, all right, whether he actually mastered a given ability or aspect of the foreign language or not yet. All actually statements are and instructions are in the target language, so in English, right, but also in your native language, so in Polish. But what is interesting, it is the fact that in the European language portfolio, all the instructions are actually in at least 4 languages. So there is Polish, right, as your native language, but there is also English, German, French, and Russian. So let's have a look at language, right, and your abilities are related to speaking. Have a look. Potrafię jasno I szczegółowo wypowiadać się na tematy związane z moimi zainteresowaniami, right? I can talk about topics related to my field of interest in a clear and detailed way. And then there is a kind of a chart, all right? And you as a learner, you reflect on this particular ability. And in the chart you have 3 options. Potrafię, ćwiczę, zamierzam to osiągnąć. All right. In some other versions, you may also find dates, right? So you, as a learner, you actually fill in the date, and you may trace a kind of your linguistic development, right, over the time. So there are some boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And about these boxes, there are dates, and you follow your progress over time. To give an example, this point is related to speaking, and you have about 20 different sub-points, such as szukam okazji do rozmowy w języku obcym, przemawiam na głos przed lustrem, prowadzę ze sobą rozmowy na głos, uczę się dialogów i monologów na pamięć, często powtarzam na głos wypowiedzi nauczyciela i lektora. Rozmawiam z koleżankami, kolegami w języku obcym. Right? And then you put a tick against these boxes that refer to your person. Of course, the main idea that is behind the European language portfolio is that whatever your learners do, it is not evaluated by the teacher. All right. So you as a learner, you have a kind of an insight into your learning process. You self-evaluate your progress, but it's not a kind of a test. So you are not allowed to present it to any teachers, and the teachers are not allowed to evaluate your portfolio or to give you any grades. Apart for these 2 main functions that we've just discussed, there are some other functions that are equally important, such as pedagogic function. ELP enhances the motivation of the learners by improving their ability to communicate in different languages, learning additional languages, seeking new intercultural experiences. So definitely, if anybody asks you the question, what is actually ELP about? What's the main idea of ELP? Well, you should say, well, number 1, it's reporting function for our students, evaluative function, but primarily it's for enhancing our students' motivation, right? And it also incites and helps learners to do what? Reflect their objectives, all right? You as a learner, you suddenly realize that, well, I've got some problems with pronunciation. Maybe I should work more on over my pronunciation. Or ways of learning. Maybe my way of learning was not successful. Many learners actually discover that there is something that is called, learning strategies. They never heard in their lives about communication, learning strategies. And success in language learning. Many learners have no idea that there is a kind of a recipe for being successful in a foreign language. And by means of ELP, they are able somehow to find, the right path to success. Planning their learning, of course, right? And finally, learning autonomously. Apart from enhancing motivation, ELP also enhances our students' autonomy. They somehow, discover that learning strategies, communication strategies, it is something that may be implemented outside the classroom, all right? So they are somehow motivated to use other instruments than just, the books, course books, to learn foreign languages. To give you some examples, for instance, information technology, internet, podcasts, vidcasts. These are all examples of different tools that may be used by our learners for learning, right? But definitely it's related to autonomous learning. And finally, it encourages learners to enhance their prolingual and intercultural experience through contacts and visits, reading, use of the media, and different projects. Within the folder, there are different projects that may be assigned by the teacher. Of course, once again, as you remember, the teachers are not allowed to give you any grades. The teacher may ask the students to give some feedback on the project, all right, to share their experiences with other students in a group, but definitely they cannot be evaluated. To give you an example of such a project, this is the European portfolio that is designed by for teenagers, for adolescent learners. And in this particular ELP document, we may, for instance, find a project that is related to making your students aware that the English language is the language that is used not just in Great Britain, but in different other countries across the world, right? So there is a kind of a map, right? And the students may actually draw the maps on their own, and they may mark different countries in which English might be used as either the foreign language or the second language. Now, let's focus on the structure or the ELP. There are actually three main components of all ELPs. This structure was proposed in 1991 at an intergovernmental symposium in Dusseldorf in Switzerland. And these working committees, they decided that in all the countries in the European Union, in all the ELPs, there will be the same three components, the same three structures, okay, sections. The first one should contain formal qualifications related to a common European scale, right? That means that you as a learner, you should be able to evaluate your competences, right? Whether your linguistic competence is at A1 level, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, and so on. And another section, in another section, the learner himself or herself keeps a personal record of language learning experiences. So this is what I've presented to you some time ago. So there is a kind of a chart, or there is no chart, but there are, some boxes for you to fill in, right, and dates. And you focus on your abilities, right, on your competences in a given point in time. And after 2 or 3 months, you open up once again your ELP document and you notice what? A progress. And possibly a third section, which would contain examples of work done. The last part is the most popular among the learners, because in this part you may include different products of your project work. You may also include your tests, right? Your written assignments, anything that actually is a kind of a document of documents your work and your progress. And now let's have a look at ELP's components in detail. The first section is called Language Passport. Then we have Language Biography, as you may see, and the last one is Dossier. Let's start from Language Passport. Depending on ELP's ELP version, it may have a different form. In ELP for high school learners and student learners, it is in the form of a booklet. It looks like this, right? And in this booklet, you just fill in different charts, right? And in this way, you evaluate your competence. But it's actually not your own evaluation, but having different certificates or having information from your teachers on the level of proficiency that you have. You just fill in different boxes in this chart. So the majority of learners know whether they are A1, A2, B1, B2, C1 or C2 at C1 or C2 levels. But if you as a learner have a problem, there is self-assessment grid that is provided to all the learners in this passport, and you may read out what are requirements for a particular level. So this is Language Passport, right? Now we are moving to Language Biography, in which you as a learner, you capture your own experience of learning and using foreign languages and encountering other cultures. Once again, there are different varieties of ELP's documents because they are somehow adjusted to different age groups. This is biography, language biography that I took from European Language Portfolio that is designed for learners, for adolescent learners, age 10 up to 15. It looks like this, right? Biography, language biography, and what is inside. So when I have a look at the first page, I can see a chart, all right? Języki, które słyszę wokół siebie, right? Languages I hear around me. And you have a chart. Languages, English, right? Russian, German. But what is interesting, there are even some other languages that are quite exotic for us. Arabski, białoruski, francuski, litewski, niemiecki, all right? It's all in your native language. And then in the chart, there are some headings such as you hear these languages w domu, w szkole, w czasie wakacji, w telewizji, w radiu, na koncercie, w teatrze, u mamy, u taty w pracy. Mind you, we are talking about adolescent learners, of course. And the last chart, the last box is gdzie jeszcze. All right. What is interesting, it is that, as you remember, all the instructions are not just exclusively in English, but in other languages as well, in Russian, in German, in French, and in your native language. So in our case, this is Polish. Why it is so important? Because as you remember, the main idea that is behind ELP is to arouse some kind of awareness, your multilingual awareness, right? There are some other languages apart from English, right? And finally, we have dossier. Dossier, in which contains evidence of the owner's language and intercultural proficiency. To give you an example of such dossier, let's have a look at the same folder. All right, this is the front page, the front page from dossier for adolescent learners. And as you may see, you may include different interesting things related to your language learning history. For instance, you may include different tickets from London, right? You may write an invitation, or your first CV that you wrote in your life, or some of your tests as well, and many other products of different project works. There are, of course, many varieties of ELP documents. There are different ELPs in different countries, and of course there are different ELPs that are designed for particular age groups. But what is important, it is the fact that all these ELPs, they have some common features, namely, as you remember, these 3 sections that are obligatory, right? But at the same time, if you have a look at the first point, contextual language learning determinants are very important and characteristic of a given member state, and they are reflected in each version. Number 2, also the needs of foreign language learners in various categories, in different age groups, have been taken into consideration. What might be these needs of learners? Traveling abroad, of course, that might be the need for all the learners, right, across different European countries. But intensity of this need may differ. And this intensity of this need, right, specificity of this need, it is something that is reflected in individual ELP document. Pilot projects were launched in 15 European countries from 1998 to 2000. And of course, each ELP version has been worked out by experts, specialists in the field of methodology of foreign language learning and teaching and SLA, right? And after implementation of this pilot version, some other versions, real versions, were launched. All right, so let's have a closer look at all these versions of ELP documents. They rely on source ELP, but still there are some final versions considerably vary between the countries. These obligatory features, namely the division between, into the sections and so on, right, that are defined as a set of principles and guidelines. You may find actually all these principles and guidelines at the website that is visible in the slide. But these fundamental principles that are shared by all the ELPs across all the member state countries are as follows. Number 1, ELP belongs to the learner, all right? So you as a learner, you are the owner of these documents. So if you have the folder like this, right, with some pages inside, it's up to you what you do with these pages. If you are tired or if you have no time, you don't have to fill in any boxes or any charts, right? Because it is something, as you remember, that is not obligatory for your learners. And it cannot be evaluated, as you remember. Number 2, an ELP documents and gives value to all language and intercultural competences and experiences, right? I would actually focus the word to all language, right? Not just, primarily the English language, right? In the European Union, we say to the phenomenon of English as lingua franca, we say no, all right? All languages are equally important. And number 3, an ELP promotes plurilingualism and multiculturalism. And finally, ELP helps to develop learner autonomy. So this is what we've been just talking about, right? You as a learner, you discover some learning strategies, and then outside the classroom, when you go abroad or you meet a native speaker in some informal situation, or you discover some other ways of learning foreign languages, for instance, by means of internet, podcasts and vidcasts, all right? So this is what we mean by developing your autonomy, learning autonomy. Of course, all these ELP's versions Once they were written by experts, specialists, right, in the field of methodology of foreign language learning and teaching. These versions have to be somehow validated, right? And there is a special committee. It's called Validation Committee. It was established in 2001 that actually decides whether a given version, right, is in line with the principles and guidelines and whether it can be accepted or not. So it checks if a particular version of the ELP conforms to these principles and guidelines, and if there is a positive opinion of this validation committee, such ELP, like this, right, is awarding an accreditation number. In 2006, there were about 80 ELPs that have been validated. And at this stage, there were several more that were actually reviewed prior to validation. To my knowledge, at this stage, there are more than 100 ELPs versions. And of course, we are not interested what happens with ELPs in Croatia, in Czech Republic, right, or in other European countries. The priority for us, these are ELPs that are in Poland, functioning in Poland. Up to this stage, we have 5 different ELPs documents, right? The first one is ELP for kindergarten children, for young learners, age 3 up to 6. Well, of course, in the first ELP, there is nothing for kids to write, right? There are lots of, there is lots of drawing, for instance, drawing different maps and marking different places in the world where English or German or French may be used. And you also have accreditation number, but I guess it's not so important for you. ELP for primary school learners, right? Age 6 up to 10, then ELP age 10 up to 15, and then ELP for high school and student learners, right? And finally, ELP for adults. To my knowledge, there is also ELP for visually impaired and blind learners. However, right now there is no Polish version. Actually, there are some specialists who are working over the Polish version for these special education needs students. Okay, as you remember, all ELPs are different across different member state countries, but there are some common features. And I guess that you remember from the previous slides that each version should somehow reflect the specificity of the learners and of a given country. So let's focus on this specificity of Poland, right, of the Polish reality. As I guess that you know that Poland joined the ELP project in 2000, and at the very beginning, we as Poland, we were just observing what was going on, right? In September 2002, we became an active participant of ELP project, and we started working over different versions of ELP, right? And then Polish ELP was prepared and tested by a group of ESL specialists. At this time, Barbara Głowacka was main coordinator of this document. And the first ELP was in the form of a pilot project, right? With the contribution of learners and teachers from 42 schools. It was launched in 2003 with 450 learners, and then with 1,000 learners of primary and middle schools all over the country. So talking about this specificity of our Polish reality, we need to take into consideration the following points. Well, the first one is that we joined the European Union not so long ago in comparison to other European countries. And when we joined the European Union in 2004, what happened was increased mobility. All Poles wanted to travel, right? Especially to Ireland, to Great Britain, right? We had a chance to travel to all these countries without having any passports. So that was a time when the Poles started eagerly learn foreign languages and foreign language cultures. So mobility is the key word here, and mobility is also related to greater chances of finding, well, better conditions of living in target language countries and better opportunities of for finding a job, right? And the second factor that was actually taken into consideration was limited funds to travel abroad, limited access to native speakers of a target language. It is generally acknowledged that nowadays, the Polish learners may travel abroad without any passports, but I think it's a great myth that everybody may travel. You may travel whenever you want to, on one condition, that you have money. And from a kind of interview, from a kind of survey, Professor Pawlak, Marciniak, Lis Barczak, so the team of experts that actually found out from this survey that still lots of learners, especially these who live in small villages and towns, they do not have opportunities to travel abroad. And another factor that was taken into consideration was that learners, adolescent learners between ages 13 and 18, they still possess inborn ability for foreign language learning. Whether you believe in the critical period hypothesis or not, one thing is obvious, right? That at some stage, it's a little bit easier, right, for us to learn foreign languages than at some other stages in our life. And it is something that was also considered in the Polish version of the ELP. And another factor was that in ELP that was designed for the group 16 plus, right, so for high school learners, the experts noticed that there is a great advantage over the middle school group in this respect, and they are more likely to reflect on a learning process, to set learning goals and to evaluate objectively, take a part of responsibility for language acquisition and take autonomous actions. To make the long story short, the experts noticed that there is a great gap between gymnasium, right, middle school or junior high school, whatever you call it, and secondary school learners or high school learners. In this respect, that gymnasium learners, junior high school learners, are not actually aware what they are doing, and even if they are doing something, they don't know what is the main objective of learning languages, and so on and so on, right? Then they do not reflect so easily on their learning process. They don't know what is good for them, what is bad for them, right? To make the long story short, it's a very difficult period in their lives. And autonomy, actually, it's not a good idea for junior high school learners, right? When you are 17, 18, 19, you are more and more independent. At the same time, you are more responsible and you are ready for taking some autonomous actions, autonomous behavior. So this aspect was also taken into consideration by the specialists working over the Polish version of ELP. And finally, in a foreign language classroom, traditional teaching methods are used based on memorizing. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, there are still many teachers working in Polish education system who are, even if they are, very well trained and they know that nowadays we should teach in line with communicative approach, or at least we should introduce a combination of different methods, they are still very, very traditional and they believe that the best method is this that is based on memorization. So they teach in line with grammar translation method and boring audiolingual method. And this is Polish reality. But once again, it's a very important piece of information for the experts, the specialists who are working over the Polish version of ELP. I guess that at this stage of our deliberations about the ELP, you pose yourself a question. Who actually needs the ELP? It's a waste of time. And actually, I can tell you that different research that was conducted among the teachers working at primary school, right, in a primary school or junior high school, different research actually revealed that the teachers are very, very skeptical about it, all right? So let's have a look at the research that actually sheds some light on the attitude of teachers, Polish teachers, towards the ELP. In this research, 164 ELP users participated. There were 62 middle school and 102 high school learners. For some of them, the second language was English, right? Actually, for 134. For others, English was functioning as the third language. So German was their second language and the third language was English. And ELP was implemented between September 2009 and February 2010. Let's have a look at the first preliminary data from the interview, right, that was gathered. Have a look. These are the reactions of teachers and actually learners. Let's start from learners. ELP is a waste of time. This is what the learners said after the presentation of the ELP, the potential of the ELP. Or, ELP is good for child learners, but not for me, right, for high school learners. Or we can use the time in a classroom, but more effectively. This is really funny because the learners actually think that, well, this is the waste of time and probably swatting grammar rules is more effective than spending the time over, drawing some maps or filling in some charts. And the last reaction is, what is it for? The learners actually had no idea about the main objective of implementation of this document. So let's have a look at some research details. What I wanted to find out from my learners and my teachers from different schools was whether ELP application at English classes will have a positive impact on students' motivation towards the language and increase in their competence. And the research instrument that I implemented was a questionnaire. So these are the questions that I posed to the learners. The first one, are you more motivated towards foreign language learning after a 6-month period of the ELP application? Or number 2, do you think that your foreign language learning competence has increased? And finally, what aspect of your foreign language learning competence has been enhanced? And let's have a look at results. All right, when you have a look at the results, look, 82% of our respondents said that definitely yes, there is a motivational role of this ELP. And as it comes to the increase in foreign language competence, almost 90% of respondents agreed upon the point that definitely it has some positive impact on increase in foreign language competence. 10% rather yes, right, as you may see. But there was 1% actually of learners who have no idea whether they learned something or not, whether they feel really better in foreign language learning or not. All right, as you may see, it was more difficult to fish out the answers from the students on what particular language aspect, their learning competence has been enhanced. So 46% they decided that learning strategies, it was something that they really learned, right? 30% language needs identification. So they've somehow found out what they need, right? They were able to evaluate their weak points and strong points. 11% communicative competence, all right? So they discovered different ways of successful, effective communication. 8% intercultural competence. So they discovered maybe new ways for them of understanding, right? target language culture. And finally, 5% competence of language skills evaluation, right? So finally, they were able to evaluate themselves as the learners. Most of the time, who evaluates the learners in the classroom? Teachers, right? But it's more difficult to evaluate yourself as a learner. And the secondary aim of this research was to examine the attitudes of Polish language teachers to the ELP project and to establish the problems related to ELP implementation. And this time we implemented a survey, right? We distributed actually a survey. It was disseminated in an electronic form to 46 teachers of English, right? But what is interesting, guys, out of this group of 46 teachers, only 3 of them were involved in the implementation of the ELP document. Others either had no idea about the ELP document or they actually heard about it. And I wanted actually to find out what were the reasons for not implementing this document in a classroom. So let's have a look at the first question. How do you evaluate the idea of ELP? Very, very positively, right? Or negatively? Surprisingly enough, guys, 72% of these teachers, they never heard of it. And I guess that some of you who are actually practitioners, right? You are junior teachers or even senior teachers, and you work in different kinds of schools, probably you never heard about the European portfolio. And who is to be blamed? Well, definitely not you. Now, let's focus on the problems that are related to ELP implementation in school environment. Have a look. 67% of these teachers, they actually blame the lack of teacher training, all right? So they never heard about it, all right? They don't know how to implement it in the classroom in practice because they don't know how to do it, even if they heard about it. They were not provided with any instructions, all right? Have a look. There are so many books. There is one folder for students, right? There are also, have a look, so many other guidelines. Some guidelines, przewodnik metodyczny, guidelines for teachers. So many pages to look through, right? Definitely, we as teachers, we need some special training. 20%, they actually express their opinion that it is time pressure for covering compulsory material that hinders them from implementation of the ELP. There is no time for doing it. That is an absolute must for us as teachers. That is the syllabus, and we need to cover the syllabus. And have a look, 10% lack of acceptance of school authorities and students' parents. It's unbelievable. But there are some headmasters who have no idea what the ELP is about, and they actually say, no, there is no agreement from our side to implement it. And the same is with students' parents. Parents have some expectations as to you as a teacher, right? They want you to cover the syllabus, to prepare their children to final examinations, right? And not to waste their time, your time, precious time, on some ELP document. And finally, number 3, it's about 3%, lack of free of charge ELP materials. Guys, that's a great misunderstanding. ELP is free of charge. You don't have to pay any money, right? So all the materials are actually provided to the teacher. All right, it's just up to you whether you want to enhance your students' motivation, develop their autonomy by means of the ELP or not. Okay, and some final conclusions. Definitely after this research, we may say that ELP increases both motivation and language learning competence. All right, it is undeniable fact that this is what ELP does. But 72% of teachers, they never heard of the ELP document. So definitely there is the need to provide information to the Polish language teachers on ELP. And there is a great need to introduce different forms of training. And finally, there is the need to inform school authorities, your headmasters, or maybe some institutions in your towns, in your region, and students' parents on beneficial role of the ELP document. As you know, in foreign language learning, what is really, really important, it's not a great exposure of the language, right? But what really matters is the frequency of this exposure, and number two, motivation. And definitely the ELP document, what it really does is enhancing this motivation. And there is something that is currently done, right, to inform teachers on how to use effectively the ELP document. There's a kind of a project that has been designed actually just for 1 year. And I think that next year, you as teachers, you will be having the chance to have a look at the website and to read out all the news of this project. So the target audience for activities planned in this project and project results will be definitely presented to teacher educators, teacher working as multipliers in networks, and decision makers at ministry level or regional boards of education involved in language education policy, inspectors and heads of language schools. And expected results and output is developing and dissemination of online materials that I guess will be available for you as well next year or maybe in 2 years' time. And these materials will be available in different languages, so not just in the target language that is English or German or French, but also in our native language. All right, thank you for your attention. And I guess that when you come back to your school, you will encourage the headmasters, your learners, and the parents of your learners to use the ELP document.